Hello, everybody. I think we're live. It's 9 o'clock, and hopefully you're hearing me. This is the trial run, demo run of the first potentially weekly gathering as we go over the real estate data. I believe I am recording this session so that we can archive and post it later. It looks like we have 7 people online. I am online. We'll be covering 22 different micro market areas in Santa Clara County, which is stuff that I haven't really done before. I normally just focus on single family homes in Santa Clara County. I have made, for the most part, Santa Clara County single family homes red and a little larger so that people can see it quickly. The data we're going to be going over is in order right here. We're going to do DOM, which really is meaningless, then DUI, which I think is one of the most significant data points, overbidding frequency, magnitude of overbidding, the inventory, offers, closings, durations, and sale price. Because there's a very significant weekly cycle in real estate data, my data is all based on 5 weeks. So the 5-week cycle that we're discussing today ended at 11:59 last night and goes back for 5 weeks, starting at 12:01 Saturday, February 22nd. I expect we're going to be seeing some significant changes to the market as we come out of shelter in place. So I'm going to try to come up with a way of doing weekly data instead of 5-week data, just so that you have a better idea what's happening. I believe this meeting is going to be timed out automatically at 40 minutes. So I'm going to jump into it, try to hold questions to the end, and we'll see how it works. And I do want feedback at the end. So the first slide here is data that we normally don't even look at, but it's not been a problem. What I'm looking at is the number of transactions falling through, and this is reported by the MLS. And here on the 16th is when shelter in place was announced. Unfortunately, I don't have data before that, but when I look at that, there was a few extra TFTs here right shortly after shelter in place, but I really don't see a huge increase in the number of TFTs. The number of change to sold is clearly greater. The number of new listings is greater. MLS listings came out with a thing where there was a 45% increase in the number of TFTs from last year to this year. But when I looked at the data, one of the things I found out was they were doing it across all geographical areas and all types of properties. When you started looking at Santa Clara County, it had a significantly reduced increase in TFTs. The real question is, what is normal? So I'm not sure that's very useful. And since I'm a data person, we'll sidetrack, but this isn't too much of a sidetrack. How you present the data is extremely important. And this graph is how the County of Santa Clara is currently displaying the number of coronavirus cases. And you can see the line going up pretty steep, and it looks pretty scary. But in a biological event like coronavirus, you should be putting it on logarithmic scale. And now if you look at it, you have a steep line here, and if you look at it, this line might be a little more shallow. And what that would tend to say is we have slowed the spread of the disease a little bit, but we also have to keep in mind shelter in place didn't start until the 17th. Then there's times for incubation and showing symptoms. So the data post shelter in place really isn't available. So how you look at data becomes really important. So this is days on market. You can see it before the first of the year, it came down fairly dramatically, and it does that because people don't have their home on the market over the holidays. And so now the red line is Santa Clara County. We're going along at 8 days, and then we drop down to 7 days with shelter in place. And I think part of that is just there's fewer listings coming on the marketplace, and it just occurred to me the MLS is working on freezing days on market. So homes will be selling now with 0 days. I'm not going to freeze my data, and I'm doing that, one, because it would be extra work. Number two, I think it's better to leave the data as unprocessed as possible and just mentally make adjustments. If you start processing the data, then you have to worry about how things go. And in addition to all the 22 different micro market areas, here are the graphs for the 3 different counties. Red is Santa Clara County, brown is San Mateo County, and yellow is townhouse condo in Santa Clara County. So you can see they're all down. It's 7 and 8 days. I mean, we can't be complaining. We can complain about the lack of volume, but not the speed of the marketplace. And then this would be the micro market areas for Santa Clara County. And I'll mention it now. Little jumps like this, that's a bad data point, and you didn't see them. You didn't see some more obvious ones. I go through periodically and clean up the data, but generally the data is pretty accurate. Hopefully I didn't lose everybody because I just got flashed that my internet screen was unstable. So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go on to DUI, which is the next slide. So this is DUI, and here's the bad data points that really stand out because you're down here, every micro market area jumps up, and this was a time when I was having computer problems, and it's the end of January to February 1st. Again, buried in here, you can see Santa Clara County data going along. And we need to put this in a little bit of perspective because anything below 40 is what I call an extreme seller's market. So when you're getting down here below 20, which is the horizontal line right behind here, I mean, that's a phenomenal marketplace as far as a seller is concerned. And it's actually almost too crazy. It's too fast. So a balanced market is from 40 up to 80. And each area has its own speed that's normal. But you can see all of Santa Clara, almost all the micro market areas are down here, and that's just a strong market. Now, you can argue that and it's probably true, there looks like there's a slight increase in DUI going here. But with the few number of transactions, it's really not an accurate representation of what would happen if we went out into the free marketplace. The other thing that I want to try to find out is Palo Alto, and I think it might be this. Well, there's San Mateo County expensive, but Palo Alto is higher than it normally is. Maybe it's this one. Well, there's Los Altos, Palo Alto. So here, this dark brown line right here is Los Altos, Palo Alto. And what's interesting is it is normally leading the county, which means it's normally below the county. Right now, and for some time, here's the red line, it's been above the county. So that's of interest, and it will come up again a little bit later. Countywide data again, and I'm just gonna flash this up so that you can decide whether you want it. And then for future meetings, I'll put all the displays I'm planning on showing in one version of Excel so that I don't have to reshare. But again, the bad data points really stand out. You can see the different counties, but countywide, Santa Clara County is at 30, condos is like at 31, and San Mateo County is a little bit higher. Again, it's worth pointing out, San Mateo County is normally faster than Santa Clara County, but right now it's clearly a little bit slower. I think we're into a little bit of an affordability issue, and I think we'll see that in Santa Clara County, where the more affordable areas are actually the faster areas, which is maybe what you would intuitively think, but is not what the market is normally doing. So I think that finishes it up for DUI. So from DUI, I will go to frequency and magnitude of overbidding. Here's the frequency of overbidding, and this is significant in the fact that it is one sense of how much pressure the buyers have in order to buy a house. Do they have to overbid? And this is how frequently that happens. So back here at the start of the year, and I'm also not going back 20 years like I have the data for, and I'm doing that because we're concerned more about what the changes are that happened with shelter in place. So you can see we started off the year with about 44, actually it looks like it's about 42 and a half of the properties were selling for more than the asking price. Right after the first of the year, things stayed pretty flat. The Super Bowl, an event that people paid attention to locally. Real estate's an optional event. I maintained the real estate market was going to be delayed because of that. And basically right around here, February 2nd, all of a sudden this red line starts taking off. And we got up to the point where basically something like 70% of the homes were selling for over asking price. So 7 out of 10 sellers were getting more than they were asking. Again, and I'm going to probably stop doing this. This is the 3 data points for the county. You can see that they're all doing very well and up there. And again, it's unusual to have one bad data point like this, but it looks like I would suspect that that's a bad data point for San Mateo County. And since I produced these early hours of this morning, I didn't have time to do any data correction. So I will go back through and try to get rid of some of the bad data points going forward. And I'm going to stop sharing, and next we'll be going on to the magnitude of overbidding. The magnitude of the overbidding sort of gives an idea of how much buyers have to overbid versus how frequently. So here we were with magnitude. So you can see at the beginning of the year, we were down just at about 100.3% actually. And you can see it stayed flat basically until Super Bowl. Super Bowl ended, and then it took off a little bit. And then a weekend after, right around the 14th, it really started to shoot up. And again, now you can start seeing the bad data points, the dip down here. Just go right over and ignore it, because you can see the red lines back up over there. Again, it shows that the buyer is going into shelter in place. And even now, post shelter in place, the buyers were feeling the demand. But you have to remember, a closing is required to have a sale price to calculate the frequency and magnitude of overbidding. And so with that going on, there's a lag of about 30 days. So even though we're, 10 days post shelter in place, we're really got another 20 days before it will show up in the data place. Next coming up is inventory. And the reason inventory is next is inventory, when I look at the data, inventory has a bigger impact on what the market's doing than the number of sales. In other words, the number of sales tends to be far more consistent. And so if inventory is high, you tend to be going into a slow marketplace, and inventory is slow, you tend to low, you tend to be going into a fast marketplace, and the sales tend to be consistent. So here's inventory, basically very low over the holidays at the first of the year, and then it started increasing a little bit, and then it increased a little bit more rapidly post Super Bowl. And now here's your shelter in place on the 17th, and you can see, boom, all of a sudden inventory came down. And, it's clearly, it shows down in every area, and that makes sense. People were freaked out. People didn't, it was something unusual. People reacted by canceling listings and that kind of stuff. But, we're still down here at 700. We're not having a huge slope up. We really don't have the trend here. But I think anything that's happening now is really irrelevant, because we really don't know what the consumer wants to do. We know what's happening, but, if the shelter in place was lifted tomorrow, how many listings would flood the marketplace, how many buyers would flood the marketplace. And it's going to take a week or two for even to get a handle on it, because listings are going to come out on, immediately. Buyers are going to need a weekend to see the homes, and then offers are going to get accepted. So we're going to go from inventory to the number of offers accepted. And number of offers accepted obviously is important, but with shelter in place, the number is going to be going down. It has gone down a little bit, but here are the data. So again, we're coming in, and because I go back 5 weeks, the low part is towards the end of January, because it turns out to be something like December 20th to actually, it's more like December 15th to January 22nd, sort of the low point, because now you're going back, encompassing the parts on both sides of the major end of your holidays. And then you can see it going rapidly up. And basically right here is when shelter in place was announced and it took effect. And now you can see the number of offers has come down. And again, this hasn't dropped to zero, because I'm going back 5 weeks. And so 3 out of the 5 weeks of my data point are before shelter in place. So this number is going to come down quite a bit more as we get 100% past shelter in place. And again, Santa Clara County, it's hard to pick up, especially down here, each one of your lines, but they're congested. I could change the scale here a little bit to make it a little bit easier for people to pick out their individual micro area, and I probably will not do this. I might have it set up in the future. So now you have more, you lose Santa Clara County, but you can start picking up the different micro markets a little bit easier. You can see, and a lot of this is, they're not all the same size, just because you only can pick certain variables to pick your data from. So that is it for number of offers. And the next thing is the number of closings. And again, this is going to go back even further in time because of the 5-week period of time to close an escrow. And so now that should be up. So here's the number of closings. It came down. The bottom of the number of closings is basically, as you'd expect, a week after the bottom of the number of offers. And then it was going up. And it's still basically going up and will continue to go up until we work through it. It's going to be coming down a little bit in the near future because of TFTs and things like that. But, you know, it was basically still going up. And it's because the data isn't impacted from shelter in place yet at this point. Now what we're going to do is look at the duration of escrows. And this is something that we normally don't pay a whole lot of attention to, but it gives you some idea what the standard escrow is. And, you know, it's a little surprising to see this one line here plummeting down, but, you know, it's Foster City, Redwood Shores. When I look at my data set for that micro market area, there's probably only a handful of properties in there. So it's almost a meaningless point. You can see that the bulk of the areas are below 30 days. And you can see some areas are closing their transaction. Median transaction, I would suspect I'm using, is in quickest 3 weeks. Clearly, it's much faster than what I got in the real estate industry when the standard was 45 days. You know, it's one of the things that internet does. But again, what I'm sort of expecting, and you might be able to start seeing it in some of these areas, I would expect to start seeing some of these escrows get delayed. I know I have had 2 that went into escrow just before the shelter in place. Same lender, 2 days apart. One is going to close, believe it or not, in just about 21, 22 days. The other one probably is going to need an extension for a 30-day closing because the appraisal was just done. So I'm going to be closing the first one next week, and the second one was just 2 days later using the same vendors is much later because we're basically almost 3 weeks into it and the appraisal is just being done. But so I'm expecting the duration of these escrows to go up. I'm really not expecting that much in the way of TFTs, but you know, that's hard to really judge, unfortunately. The next data point that we're going to talk about is sale price finally. What's happening with sale price? And obviously, sale price, again, you don't know until after the escrow is closed, so there's a time lag. This graph is mislabeled. This is the 10 percentile graph, even though it says 90 percentile. So I'm going to change that right now. That's what happens when you do things so quickly. Because if you look at Santa Clara County, you come over here and you're somewhere around 800,000. There is no way that's a 90 percentile price. Again, the same thing I was saying, that it's less stable because there's less of a marketplace. But this is the lowest prices in the given area. And now we'll go on to what most people are familiar with, which is the median price. So at this point, this is the median price. You can see Santa Clara County was dipping into the first of the year. And I'm saying this is the first of the year because it's delayed by 30 days. And then you can see it was coming back up. And we were somewhere right around $1.4 million. So, you know, not a bad median price. If you come down from the low point, it's up from 1140. That's artificially low. If you just go back to the beginning of December, you're at 1270. So that's the dip that we have every holiday. And it's not an actual dip in the value of the properties. One of the things that when you look at the size of the homes that are being sold over Christmas, they tend to be smaller homes. So smaller homes tend to, you know, be less expensive. There's also a geographical shift. There's a bigger decrease in the more expensive affluent areas than there are in the cheaper, more affordable worker-bee type homes. And so when one area becomes more disproportionate to their normal market makeup, that influences the median price, which is one of the reasons I went into this micro market areas. So when you look at the data up here, one of the things that I was going to point out is if you look at this data is Los Altos, Palo Alto. It was down at 3 million. Hard to say down at 3 million. It jumped up to 3.5 million. It's already back down to 3 million. but this is on closings that happened before shelter in place. So basically, with the way I read that data is Los Altos, Palo Alto did the normal jump up. The market really wasn't there, and it fell back down. That has nothing to do with coronavirus. I think it has everything to do with a shift in the market for whatever reason, where Los Altos, Palo Alto has been lagging and basically the slowest market area compared to its norm of all the 22 micro market areas I have. And I think part of what's going on is affordability. I think part of what's going on is jobs are shifting further south. So it's becoming less desirable of an area as far as close commutes to work. Obviously, we don't have Google Village opened up downtown San Jose yet, but that would be a bit of a value, a bit of a commute. But for whatever reason, the Los Altos, Palo Alto area basically had already dropped back down way back here on March the 7th. If you subtract off even a 4-week closing on that, you're back basically to February 7th, was way before we were worried about coronavirus, at least globally. Now, maybe the people in Los Altos and Palo Alto knew it was coming and were smart and jumped down. But my concern is, this decrease, and notice it's basically the only decrease of the entire marketplace, happened unrelated to coronavirus. Now I'm going to go and find the 90 percentile data. So now this data is more bouncy, and it's because, again, you're only dealing with 10%. And when you're dealing with the top homes, you can get a top home that's way more expensive. And you can see in the Los Altos, Palo Alto area, it's basically been a decline. So your more expensive homes in the more affluent area in Santa Clara County have been in a decline. At the same time, Santa Clara County and most micro market areas have been increasing. So that says that something happened in those areas. Or actually, that was the last graph. So I think since I wrapped that up in basically 30 minutes, which is much faster, I will shut up and I will let people unmute themselves and ask questions that they have and see if I can answer them. I got 13 people online. Does anyone have a question?
Richard, can you hear me?
I can.
Catherine Gortner. Oh, good. First time trying my new handy dandy mic and headset here. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it. Do you have any, is it too soon to have any sort of prognostication of where you think, I know you're saying Palo Alto may have overshot a little bit, but for the medium expensive markets?
I actually, there's no data, obviously. My gut feeling from what I'm seeing is there were some initial increase in people walking away from transactions, but the numbers were very small. I don't see this being a big impact, and that's almost counterintuitive because it's clearly a huge economic impact. But the only explanation I have is the people that can afford to buy the typical home in Santa Clara County are the high-tech people whose income, for the most part, hasn't been impacted. So, and listings that are coming on the market, even though people shouldn't be doing this, are selling. So I'm not sure there's going to be any long-term impact. Someone indicated that there would be an initial decrease and then a bump up. I'm not sure. I think buyers want to get out there and buy. We'll see. So it's too early to have any data. It's just sort of everybody's gut feeling.
I understand. Great. Thanks.
All right. I'm very open for any comments on how to make this better for future weeks. I will go a little slower if people aren't going to be asking questions, and maybe we can take questions as we go. Is there any slides that someone would like to see again?
Richard, Jess Vogt here. So you showed a slide on offers. I forget exactly what it was titled, but it was a number of offers and it was over a rolling 5-week period. And it showed a decline, and I didn't, again, quite get looking at that decline. I understand that it was pre-shelter in place, but yet it was a decline, and I'm just wondering if that decline in offers, if we can look at that percentage decline and say, okay, well, this is recent. And even though a lot of it is pre-shelter in place, if that's kind of a hint or clue of what we may see going forward even more. Yes, the offers in the past 5 weeks.
Yeah, all my data is on the past 5 weeks. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going to blow this up so we can look at it a little bit more. Just in the last, basically say March 1st. So now in beginning of March, it's hard to really see, but you can see the slope going up a little bit. And then basically right here on the 16th, which is when they did the press announcement, it has come down. So there's been less offers. Think of it, if I'm doing 35, let's talk days, 35 days of data at the end of the 17th. So on the 18th, you only have one data point out of 35 that are post-virus, post-shelter in place. So now here on the 28th, we basically have 11 out of 35 data points post-shelter in place, and the decline's happening. But the decline's happening not because buyers don't want to buy, but because buyers are following the shelter in place rules and not going out and looking at houses. I did a search that I don't have the data on here and it's from memory, but I believe I'm accurate on this. And it was a couple days back. It might have been on Wednesday. I looked for listings that came on the market after shelter in place was in effect that sold, and there was 13 of them. And out of the 13, I think I got up to 9 that I was able to confirm that was vacant. And those were the properties that people were still going out and showing. Now they're still technically in violation, but I guess people are feeling comfortable. So even if we drop to 0, these lines would only come down 3% per day because you have basically 33 data points pre-dropping to 0. So there's a lag time in this happening, but yes, you clearly can see a decrease. But normally I use offers to measure the amount of demand, and the amount of demand isn't reflected by the amount of offers. There isn't new inventory. I'm looking and sending clients new inventory every day, and the number of new offers that they can go look at. One client hasn't had a single new listing to look at, where normally they would have 3 or 4 every week. The problem that you don't know is, yes, the number of offers is going, but it's not a measure of demand.
Richard, can you go over again when you think we will have meaningful data about how many weeks, this is Catherine Gortner, about how many weeks after the shelter place is lifted or real estate is deemed an essential service so we can open for business again? About how many weeks should we advise our clients before we get good visibility into the market?
Well, whenever it happens, you're going to have to wait for the listings to come on the marketplace, and you're going to have to wait through one weekend, and then you're going to have to wait for offers to get accepted. So there's going to be a lag of 9 days plus, depending on when they release shelter in place. If shelter in place is released on Saturday, there's probably another 4, so it's 13. So I would say that you're looking at least 10 days and potentially up to about 17 days before you're getting the first sales, and that would be when you first get an inkling. But that won't be very accurate data. When I looked at this stuff, I found that, and this is going back to 1997, I looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 weeks worth of data. And what was interesting, as you would expect, weeks 1 through 3, the data was unstable, getting more and more stable. Weeks 4 and 5 were pretty equal and pretty stable. Week 6 actually, and by week 6, I mean 6 weeks of data, got less stable than week 5. And that actually surprised me. But then when you start looking at the calendar for reasons, you find out that a lot of our holidays are spaced about 5 weeks apart. So by going to 6 weeks, you ended up with 2 holidays for a short period of time and then back to 1 holiday. And holidays have a huge impact, negative impact on real estate, except for Valentine's and Mother's Day. So what I will probably do is do something like 5-week data and then try to learn how to use error bars and put on where the 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks of data is. So you sort of say, this is 5-week data, this is where the market is, but the last week the data's down here, so it looks like the market's going down. So you're 17 days probably plus at least 2, so you're basically 31 days before you're going to have any sort of reasonable estimate, in my opinion, other than gut feeling. So I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for.
You said 17 days plus 2, isn't that 19?
2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But that's not going to give us visibility, though, into where median prices are, right? That's going to take
No,
another.
median prices we won't have, and we won't have magnitude of overbidding or frequency of overbidding until those escrows close. So if they're going to be maybe longer because but I think the market will recover. But let's just say they're 30 or 40 days. Now
Yeah.
you're 2 months out before you have any indication of what the market's doing, except for anecdotal data, which is one of the reasons the industry, is handicapped themselves by not reporting sale price immediately. And I don't believe you're hurting the seller, because what a seller accepted today has no relationship on what they're going to accept tomorrow, at least in my opinion.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Richard, Jess Votar again. So hypothetical question, I don't know if you can answer this, but who do you think is going to be quicker to jump back in the market once the shelter in place is lifted? Do you think it'll be sellers with listings or buyers?
The buyers will jump in first, but they won't have anything to jump into. So they'll have to wait for the sellers to come in. I don't think this virus is in Santa Clara County, in all except for maybe the very affordable areas. I don't think this is a fundamental shift to either the supply or demand for this area. It's not like the mortgage meltdown, in my opinion, of 2007, where you impacted the real estate market by doing away with liar loans. And when you go back, you look at liar loans really increased the lower end first. And so they were actually overinflated, and then they got hit the hardest and they got the biggest depreciation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think we're just about out of time. I will hopefully record this. I'm not seeing any indication it's recording, but it tells me I can't start the recording. So I'm hoping that means it was recording automatically. And I'll send out the link, and I will try to get feedback from people. But my gut feeling with 14 people on short notice is you would like to do this on a weekly basis. Love feedback on the time and things like that. I would like to get the data from midnight Friday, which is why I went to Saturday, because of the weekly cycle of real estate. So I'll say goodbye for now and go from there. And got 2 chats flashing at me. Let me see. Maybe that's telling me.
Anybody?
Thanks, Richard, for doing this. You may have a low turnout today. That'll improve, and appreciate it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks, Glenn.
This is Catherine. I would love also if anybody can share. I know it's tangentially related to stats, but I guess the conversations between Carr and Sacramento, not today, but either here on IRBN, whether it will become real estate an essential service or not.
My 2 cents on that is whether we're an essential service or not. I think what people aren't understanding is the key thing is to keep 6 feet away from everybody else. And if we can conduct business sticking 6 feet away, whether we're essential or not, we should be able to go back to work.
I agree. I mean, I had to wrap up or help a client who was remodeling her home. She's been staying in a hotel. So, that was really kind of truly essential to get her back in her home. But when the painters were there and flooring guys were there, they weren't 6 feet. And I said 6 feet, 6 feet. So I was sort of like a school marm in there, ensuring everybody. And maybe that's some value we can bring is help educate people on the 6 feet.
Well, I think that's our leadership, and I think they're doing a bad job because, talking about data, they're telling everyone to wash hands, and that's like 1/7 at most of the transmission, where 6/7 is direct person to person. And some of the things are insane. Like if you need groceries and you go out to the grocery store, people line up 6 feet apart in line, and then they open up the door and everybody clusters up right together.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to throw out? I still have 14 people online. Anybody want to throw anything out? All right, then I will end the meeting myself, and I will send out links, and we'll do it again next week.
Thank you, Richard.
You're
Bye.
welcome.